be aware of what your self-talk is and how all of those images that you're seeing factor into your self-talk.
Today we're going to be talking about how social media may affect your body image. Let's find out. This is Spot On, a health and wellness podcast for college students, soon-to-be college students, or anyone that knows a college student. Spot On breaks through the latest health and wellness information hijacked from media headlines to provide you with accurate and usable information that is, well, spot on to meet your needs. I am your host, Dr. Joan Salge Blake. I am a nutrition professor at Boston University and the author of the college textbook called Nutrition in You, which is used in colleges across the United States and abroad. Do you think that social media photos project a realistic body image? Let's go to the street and find out.
My answer would be a very hard no.
Obviously not, because everything you see on social media is either like edited or changed to fit like a certain image of people.
I mean, the body in the picture is real, so yeah, it is realistic, but at the same time, it's kind of a glorification of a non-realistic body image in which like people see it in an image and they're just like, oh, I could be this body, but then they don't really understand what someone had to go through to get that body.
I'd say probably not, because I feel like everyone posts the best versions of themselves online, so it's probably not the most realistic. Now with apps, you can like change how your body looks, and you can like do it so that you look thinner, or you can like change your face shape.
Social media projects unrealistic aspects of life, as in you only show the good parts of your life on social media and not the bad. So you would only show a picture that's maybe a distorted picture or a flattering picture of a body, but it may be not realistic.
In many capacities, social media images have gone through a filtering process in order to improve aspects an individual likes to see improved on themselves, but other times, with the invention of things like Finstas, people allow themselves to be seen in a more holistic and true capacity.
I think that we're moving forward in terms of people using less editing, and I think also people becoming more aware of the use of Facetune and Photoshop.
Today on Spot On, I am so excited about this segment. I have on the phone here calling in is Dr. Roberto Olivardia. He is a clinical psychologist and lecturer in the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. He also has a private practice, and he specializes in working with boys and men with body image problems and eating disorders. And he also works with males and females on this issue. So he is the author of a book, which we're going to talk about. This is so interesting. The title of the book is called The Adonis Complex, which was the first book that discussed this whole full spectrum of male body image problems. So, he wrote that in 2000. So this is something that's been percolating for some time now. And he has appeared in Time Magazine, Rolling Stones. He's been featured on Good Morning America, CBS This Morning, VH1. So I am absolutely thrilled for him to be on Spot On today to talk about this very, very important issue. So Dr. Roberto, thank you so much and welcome to Spot On.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
All right. So you have this background in this, and you had said that I read that you specialize in something called body dysmorphic disorder. What is that?
Sure. So body dysmorphic disorder, or BDD for short, is a psychiatric condition that basically is characterized by people who have a preoccupation with an aspect of their appearance. So it could be their skin, their hair, their muscles, their arms, and they really see that body part as ugly, as disgusting. Sometimes they'll use words like deformed, inhuman, like they have a very significant body image distortion, about that body part, and they are constantly thinking about it, obsessed about that body part, and it's often coupled with a lot of either compulsive behaviors like mirror checking or avoidant behaviors like camouflaging that body part, not having people see it if it's something that can be covered up. It's actually a psychiatric condition that's affiliated with a high rate of depression, a high rate of suicide, of anxiety. Often it will accompany eating disorders, and it's basically seen in the spectrum of obsessive-compulsive disorders. It's in that family.
Right. So these could be perceived flaws. This is not necessarily, it's what the person may think it would be a flaw, right?
Correct. So these are the typical patient that I work with. I mean, they come in and they think that it's obvious what they're preoccupied with, and it's not. There's a whole level of insight that people might have around it, and a lot of times with BDD, there's very little insight. So they're perceived flaws, or they might be things that, let's say somebody does have freckles on their face, so there's no distortion, but the way they interpret that, they think that those freckles make them look disgusting when nobody else sees it that way.
I see. So when I was doing some homework on this and reading about it, which is, by the way, fascinating, they came up with a term called body image dissatisfaction. So what is that?
So body image dissatisfaction is basically ways that we all have a body image, which is more or less how we see ourselves physically, but also how we feel about our bodies, our attitudes around it, what relevance, what worth and value that we attribute to that in the world. And so there's a significant number of people that struggle with body image dissatisfaction, where how they see their bodies, how they think and feel about their bodies is quite negative. And there's a lot of people actually who have body image dissatisfaction who may never develop an eating disorder, although most people with eating disorders have body image dissatisfaction. Everyone with body dysmorphic disorder has body image dissatisfaction. But there are lots of people out there, especially college students, that struggle with a lot of dissatisfaction and might not think it's important to address because maybe they don't have an eating disorder, maybe they don't have BDD, but it still can significantly impact your self-esteem.
Sure, and I would imagine that would be fatiguing, mentally fatiguing.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of energy that we place on thinking about our bodies and our appearance.
What role does the media, and especially social media, have in this perpetuating this body image dissatisfaction?
Yeah, so the media, it's interesting. So I often will say that, we can't overestimate or underestimate it. So what I mean by that is, so we had eating disorders even historically. If you look at historical accounts of, there's a great book called Fasting Girls, which is written about documents of eating disorders in the 1700s and the 1800s, although they had different meanings around them. A lot of them had to do with religiosity and purity and all these themes around being clean and being a pure person. So certainly before magazines and music videos and all that came out, we know we had eating disorders. However, media is an incredible fuel to the flame, and social media even more so. And what's probably the biggest difference from when we wrote Adonis Complex in 2000 to now is the influence and the impact of social media. And the younger people that I'm seeing who are affected by body image dissatisfaction. I mean, I treat boys as young as 9 and 10 with significant body image concerns, and there are apps that you can literally take out quote unquote flaws, in your appearance. They're in high school yearbooks now. You can have your high school photo that's going to be in your yearbook photoshopped, which to me seems kind of strange because that's what you look like, however you look, and what does that mean when we are literally kind of making our faces look, it's almost like a form of cosmetic surgery. So there are countless studies that have been done over the last 10 to 15 years that show that the media has a pretty incredible impact. I mean, almost instantaneously, actually, in terms of how people feel about their bodies. That you can have someone who, there are studies that look at people who rate their own body, their own appearance, and then are exposed to whether it's visual images or movies or whatnot, and then asked to re-rate their bodies and appearance, and you almost see it, their satisfaction go down almost instantly.
Right. You know, it's interesting that you said that about the app, because I was reading about this, so I did. I downloaded one of those apps, and I guess you can take a picture of yourself, and then you can Photoshop it. And it tells you your bigger eyes, smaller eyes, forehead bigger. And Dr. Roberto, I'm doing this, and I'm making all these. It's like color forms here. I'm like just trying to make all these different shapes and everything. And finally, when I finish, I'm looking at this app saying, "Who is this person? I don't even know who this person is." So you can totally adjust everything: your eyes, your nose, your chin, and everything to the point where your mother wouldn't even recognize you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that one of those apps, I was preparing for a talk, and I have a 13-year-old son, and he said, "Oh, Dad, you should, talk about this particular app," and I had never heard of it, and he showed it to me, and he said that some of his friends, sort of do it, and, they play around with it and whatnot, and I had that exact same reaction. I thought, wow, that's really interesting, and when you actually talk to cosmetic surgeons, a lot of them will say that whereas 15 years ago, people would come in with a photo of a celebrity and say, "I want that celebrity's nose, I want that celebrity's butt, I want that celebrity's breast." Now they're coming in with their own photo altered by these apps saying, "Well, this is what I want to look like this is my ideal self." And the problem with that is that I treat a lot of college students, a lot of young people who, now dating, is something that you'll often see, through apps, but people are getting pictures of themselves, digitally altering them, posting those pictures on dating sites. And it's just such a terrible setup. And what happens is, okay, so now you're posting this picture of someone that doesn't really look like you, and not that there's anything even wrong with how you originally look, but how will that come across now to this person, let's say that you're meeting for the first time, and they're automatically going to be off-put by the fact that you clearly altered, your image in that way. Right. There's almost something that's automatically suspicious or not trusting about it, regardless of even what your appearance is. What does that mean about how we feel about the worth and value of our bodies in general if we feel the need to have to make all of those adjustments? Like, there's just this psyche part of it that's really important for people to understand that what message that sends internally.
Right. And, you have so many influencers, especially on social media, that are, potentially making these adjustments, photoshopping or changing things so that the person viewing it thinks that this is reality. So I was looking at this app, the app that you can alter your facial features, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, or whatever you want to do. And I was looking at the comments that people leave after using the app, and this female had posted that she just absolutely loved this app because it allowed her to change the features and gave me something to be glad about. And so I'm looking at this and I'm saying, that's so sad. And so what I'm saying is, my goodness, so are you looking to social media? Are you looking to the media and you're trying to compare yourself? And therefore, you're comparing yourself to something that they may have altered. And it's craziness, right? Because, and it make you feel bad about yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what the studies show. And you're absolutely right. I mean, when you look at imagery, I mean, part of one of the things that the messages I hope that people can get across from our conversation is we really have to fully be media literate, in the sense that, of course, people know that a lot of these images might be digitally enhanced, but to really understand when our self-talk is being activated. We all have self-talk about our bodies and our appearance, and I encourage everyone who's listening to this to, as a homework assignment, be aware of what your self-talk is. When you look in the mirror, do you say, "Oh, I look good today, and I'm about to start the day"? Do you think, "Oh, I'm a fat pig"? Do you think, "Oh, I'm so weak-looking"? And be aware of that, and how all of those images that you're seeing factor into your self-talk. Like, do you think, oh, okay, there's Kim Kardashian. Of course, she has, a makeup artist that spends hours on her makeup and her hair, and which is, half real and half extensions, and she is digitally enhanced through these photos. So of course, it would be unrealistic to even compare myself to that. Or do you think, wow, Kim Kardashian is so pretty, I'm not like her, therefore I'm inferior, I'm less than. And that's so important to be aware of what that self-talk is, because you're right, it's almost this kind of insanity of what we're even comparing ourselves to.
Right. It's interesting because years ago when we looked at magazines or even television shows, if it was magazines, you may have been looking at maybe the person's hair or what they were wearing. But now it's with this interactivity on social media, we sort of get sucked into their lives, and we kind of think that we're into their lives and they're following them every day. And so, again, they may be made up and photo enhanced every day, but we're thinking they're not. We forget that part, which I think is really important.
That's right. I mean, they don't really look that way going to a grocery store.
Right.
I think I always tell, I remember once working with a woman who she had just given birth to twins and was had incredible body image dissatisfaction that she had not lost the baby weight. Now, literally, we're talking maybe a month and a half after having twins. And I said, well, first of all, where is this pressure even coming from that you have to lose that baby weight, right away? I mean, your body, especially a woman's body, needs to sort of go on its own pace, especially you just had babies. And she actually said, she goes, well, I saw, I think it was Jennifer Lopez or some celebrity. I think, yes, it was Jennifer Lopez because she had twins as well. And she said, oh, I saw J-Lo on The Tonight Show, and, she looked great after 30 days. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, J-Lo, first of all, has nannies, and she has a personal trainer, and it's her job. Like, she's being paid millions and millions of dollars to get her body back into a certain place, where that's not reality for most people. And it was almost, and she's a very intelligent woman, my patient, and she said, oh, you know what, I never thought of that.
Right.
And I get that. I understand why she never thought of that, because it's presented, like, sometimes, occasionally, you'll get celebrities that put it out there, which I respect, when they say, well, look, I have nannies and I have people that do a lot of the things that, most people don't have the privilege of doing. And so, in other words, don't put me up on this pedestal. But most of them will say, oh, thank you. When people are like, oh, you lost all the weight. And it's just, I don't know, the whole conversation gets, it's so inaccurate in so many ways.
Right. Maybe what we have to do is we have to look at this and saying, when we look at social media, say, this is fiction. This is not nonfiction. So, so in other words, what we're looking at, this is like a novel, a fiction, where this is a made-up story, because their lifestyle is made up with all the support that they have. So maybe we need to think about that. We're looking at fiction when we look at some of these social medias.
Are you having trouble sleeping, focusing, or relaxing? If the answer is yes, then the TM Softs White Noise Sleep Sounds podcast has got you covered. This hour-long podcast is made to help you get rid of distractions, reduce stress, relax, and most importantly, get better sleep. You can listen to sounds of nature, white noise, relaxing music, and much, much more. You can check out the TM Softs White Noise Sleep Sounds podcast on Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, let me tell you, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Trust me, if I can do it on Anchor, anybody can do it on Anchor. Besides being easy, it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit the podcast right from either your phone or your computer. And best of all, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. And you can hear it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and many, many other platforms. So it is really like one-stop shopping, everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So really, if you're into this and you want to do this, Anchor is the place to go. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. This whole body image goes back and to little girls and little boys. And let's start with Barbie. Like, hello.
Mm-hmm.
And my goodness gracious. And I read this fascinating book called Barbie and Ruth. And what it was about Ruth Handler, who was the owner of Mattel. She's now passed away. And her daughter, Barbara. I guess, hello, Barbie. And so when she took Barbara to Europe, the girl got infatuated with this doll, and the doll was made after a German cartoon character called Lily, who was actually a prostitute. I mean, I don't think the mother, Ruth Handler, at the time understood the doll was made after a prostitute. And what she noticed was Barbara became infatuated with this doll because dressing her and putting clothes on at that time, there was no doll that was like that. So Ruth Handler brought it back to the people at Mattel and said, I make this doll. Let's get a doll that we can go for these students. And so when you think about it, I mean, I don't think poor Ruth knew that the doll was manufactured as a prostitute, but when you think about that, it almost like, oh my goodness gracious. So you have these little girls playing with Barbie, and who was Barbie role model, really?
Yeah, and as we know, I mean, there's the famous one of those studies that you hear about, especially in the body image field, that was done, I believe, in 1980, that showed that if Barbie, the doll at that time, were a real-life human female, her dimensions would be just completely disproportionate, that she would be pretty probably anorexic, and that it was very impossible to even achieve that kind of body. And, it's one of those things. It doesn't mean that, playing with Barbie dolls is going to give you eating disorders. However, at the same time, it is important to understand, well, what message is that sending? Like, why was it until just recently, as you probably know, that Mattel has now introduced a line of different Barbie dolls of different bodies. They have curvy, they have petite, they have tall. But honestly, the main reason they did that is because sales have gone down.
Right.
That a lot of moms are not buying Barbie dolls anymore for their daughters because they think it's not a good role model, that it's not we know there's more of a dialogue now about the role and the importance of body image and healthy body image. I did a study actually in the late 90s that sort of looked at the analogy of Barbie dolls with boys, and we looked at action figures, things like G.I. Joe action figures and Batman. And G.I. Joe, which has been around, for decades, was actually the most interesting because we measured the dimensions of G.I. Joe from the 1960s action figure, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and he's gotten significantly more muscular. I mean, actually, the 1990s version that we measured, if he were a real-life human male, his waist would be the same size as his bicep. And in fact, the action figure is so top-heavy because he's so muscular that it's very difficult to even stand him up I remember when we had to photograph the action figure. And a lot of, if you see Batman, with not even the six-pack, it's an eight-pack and all these defined muscles. But what was the most fascinating from that study was we looked at Star Wars action figures. So Star Wars came out in the late 1970s, and they had an action figure line. And then at that time, so this was in the mid-90s, they re-released the Star Wars movies in the theaters. They were remastered, and they re-released the action figure line. But what was interesting is both Luke Skywalker and Han Solo clearly spent a lot of time at the gym, or their action figure versions did, because they got significantly more muscular, their waist shrunk, and this is based on the same character. I mean, we're not even talking about a different version of Luke Skywalker. This is the same Luke Skywalker from the same movie. And so when we published the paper, the toy maker, published a statement saying, we had, there was no intentional attitude or anything to make the action figure more muscular, but clearly there was. And also, as an aside, Princess Leia, her breast size tripled in the action figure from the time of the 70s to the 90s. So it's something, what is going on? Why is this intentional push towards making these bodies look, this way that is just not realistic?
I want to tell you something that I read that study that you published. It was fascinating about the action figures, and I'm going to put on the Spot On Facebook page this visual that came from your study, but it is the 1970s Star Wars action figures, Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, compared to where in the 1970s, compared to the same characters in the 1990s. And I'm telling you, if you can visually think about this, the one in the 1990s looks like The Rock, looks like Dwayne Johnson. I mean, he's so built up. If I ever saw this guy in a dark alley, I'd be a nervous wreck. I mean, this guy is so jacked up there. And I'm looking at this, and it's the same thing like Barbie. So what messages is this telling little boys? If this is the character and they're playing with something like that, what message is this sending?
Exactly. I mean, even the actor, Mark Hamill, was actually quoted as saying, "Oh my gosh, they put me on steroids," when he saw the new action figure. So when the actor is saying that,
right,
clearly, something is going on. And there's no question, and this is where, my research and clinical work and working with boys is, unlike like diet pills and things like that you'll see with women, with boys, you'll see these supplements that are, sold in these quote-unquote health food stores that are not necessarily healthy for them, and anabolic steroids, which are very epidemic. I've worked with boys as young as 13 who are injecting anabolic steroids, some of whom got them from dealers in high schools, and some of them who order them over the internet. And it's a problem. And it's one of those things that people think, oh, well, there aren't that many people doing steroids. Well, now, unlike the late 80s, where a lot of the people who were doing steroids were looking like massive, like they looked really, really big. Now we see that less. So we're, I almost refer to it as politely roiding themselves, where they're taking steroids, but they don't look massive where it's obvious that they're taking steroids, but it's enough that they have the kind of body that people would be like, wow, you really work out. And that's a very hidden epidemic that a lot of people still don't understand the extent of steroid use. And these are guys, again, when they're at the gym 4 or 5 hours a day, nobody thinks they have a problem. They think, wow, he's so disciplined, he's so dedicated. But if there was a woman running on a treadmill for 5 hours, in the gym, most people would be a little suspicious of that, unless maybe she was training for a marathon or something like that. But so we have to definitely pay attention to that as well with boys.
That's so interesting, because when you look at the body image issue among females, as you just said, they're dieting or trying to get more slender to follow whatever the social media messages or in the magazines. But with the guys, it's the direct opposite. They're beefing up, trying to get more muscular.
Right. So I do see, even with the men and the boys that I've treated with anorexia, that's, some of them definitely present in ways that you would typically see, with girls as well. They want to be super skinny. But honestly, the overwhelming majority, even though they're anorexic, where they're restricting their food, the interesting thing is that they don't want to be skinny. They'll tell you that they're very unhappy that they're so skinny. But they don't want to be fat either and gain weight. They want to be lean with very little body fat.
Right.
And so if I told my patients, patient, okay, well, here's, your meal plan, and I guarantee everything you eat is going to turn into muscle, they'll eat it without a problem. And whereas with women, that's not the case. Gaining weight is the same as gaining fat in their mind. But with boys and men, being overweight and being over fat are two completely different constructs. Most men I treat don't care what weight they are.
Right.
They care what body fat percentage they are.
Right. That's so interesting. So again, it's more visual. Tell us what the Adonis complex. Can you tell us a little bit about this, because this is fascinating?
Sure. So Adonis complex was a culmination of the research that myself, my colleagues, Harrison Pope, who's a psychiatrist at McLean Hospital, and my mentor when I was in college and grad school, and Catherine Phillips, who's now at Cornell in New York, and at that time was at Brown. We, over the years, had just collaborated on various studies looking at men in body dysmorphic disorder, men in eating disorders, something called muscle dysmorphia, which is a type of BDD where men who are actually quite large and muscular see themselves as looking too puny or too weak, almost a reverse of anorexia. And so we decided to put this all in a book, and we coined this phrase, the Adonis complex. It's not a clinical term, but more to kind of denote all the different manifestations of body image problems. And Adonis, for people who may know, was a mythological character. He was half man, half god, and he really represented the ideal in masculine beauty. So all the men wanted to look like him, all the women desired him. He was strong jawline, he was powerful, sort of all the archetype of masculinity. And that's what we sort of called it. But in the book, we talk about males and eating disorders, BDD, steroid use, cosmetic surgery, media impact on boys' body image. So all the issues that you've heard about with girls and women, we talk about with boys and men.
Right. We are going to put up the link to the articles and a link to your book, The Adonis Complex, on the Spot On Facebook page. I think one very key word that you just said is that Adonis myth. That's key. It's he was mythological. So this is not a real person. So we go back to the fact that these magazines were airbrushed. Barbie doll is basically a myth. She couldn't exist today. So again, we go back to comparisons of people that were not real. And going back to social media, what we're seeing are really people that not real. If they're celebrities that are made to perform, and that's maybe what social media is, a performance, a visual performance, and we have to remember that. So how can we use social media for change? Like, what can we do? As you said, that the moms said, look, I'm not buying the Barbie doll because this is crazy. This is an unrealistic image. I'm not having my girl or children playing with Barbie doll. So what can we do as the consumer to speak out and use social media for good?
Yeah, it's a great question because social media isn't overall a bad thing, and I think that it absolutely has its benefits. One, I guess, is for people to just even be. I always tell people we should all be aware of our own talk and what we're posting, and how we're critiquing other people and what we're saying and communicating about sort of our judgments around body image and whatnot, because I find, all of us, certainly we all have our judgments and our biases, but, to be aware not only of our body image self-talk, but our talk around how we think about other body images. When we see someone who, might be in a larger body, when we see someone who's, thin, do we make assumptions in a negative way about them? But also with social media is spreading sort of information, like accurate information about how to promote healthy body image. How even as young as in kindergarten. I mean, you don't have to talk about eating disorders in kindergarten, but how do you promote, in very young kids to have them even think about their bodies, especially for girls, because, girls often their body image gets so wrapped up into this aesthetic framework at a very early age. Oh, you're so pretty. You're so pretty. And okay, that's one thing, but, what about how they might dance or how they might be athletic or how they draw or how they play guitar, that their bodies are capable of doing lots of things. And the same with boys, that a lot of times the messaging with boys, oh, you're so strong, and this notion that's the only way that their bodies, can be, as opposed to, what are other language that we have for parents to be aware of the language that they use for themselves. I mean, a lot of the young people that I've treated with eating disorders, unfortunately, they'll say, I hear my dad or my mom talk about how upset they are about their weight all the time. And of course, the last thing a parent wants to do is to influence their child negatively like that. But they weren't even aware. This mom said, I assumed if I ever had a daughter that of course I'd be careful with that talk, but I just didn't think of that with the son. Like, I didn't think that could influence a boy and his body image and how he thinks of his weight, hearing me talk about how much I hate my body. And I said, of course it does. I said, either it doesn't matter whether you're the mom or the dad. You're modeling and you're teaching something. So how can parents support each other? How can college students support each other? Because the college environment is an intense environment, and it's actually one of those transition points that we'll sometimes see an increase in eating disorders. People that transition for a lot of people is very overwhelming. So how can college students support each other? How to encourage just healthy eating in general, not to look at food as good food and bad food. How to really kind of get away from that like black and white thinking about food. How to engage in healthy activity, that it doesn't have to even be going to the gym 5 times a week. It could go going for a walk with a friend. It could be going, dancing. It could be, using your body in different ways. And then, if you're commenting on a celebrity or whatnot, I think it's always important, and it doesn't have to denigrate the celebrity in any way, but, to post, hey, this person looks good given that, all of these things were sort of done. This is a nice picture. Like, I might often comment like saying, oh, that's a nice picture of someone, but that's different than saying, oh, that person looks good, because I'm aware that is that's not really accurate, but the picture might look good, just like a painting can look good, and it's just a representation of something. But to definitely spread the word in that way, so that there's just a different language that we use in talking about it.
Right. You might want to say something like, oh, you look so happy in that picture. Good for you. You're making me smile. Yeah. Something more positive. And, you can and get help, because, if this is something that you're spending a lot of time worrying about, get help, student health services, and talk to somebody about it, because, it shouldn't be taking up most of your day. And we talked about it's very, very draining. I often say to my children, I said, the most attractive part of your body is your brain. So it's, and the outside is really, it's what's the inside, and how you think and how you look and how nice you are to people. That's what makes you attractive and a person that wants to be around. So I want to thank you so much. This has been so enlightening, and I was fascinating by this talk, this subject matter. I'm hoping that your words of wisdom here can really help everybody, which it can. So again, we're going to put all the supporting information up on the Spot On Facebook page, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was absolutely my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Spot On. I am your host, Dr. Joan Salge Blake. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Joan Salge Blake. Please subscribe to Spot On through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. Also, visit our Facebook page to join the conversation and tell us what you'd like to hear in future episodes. And oh, by the way, could you ask 5 of your friends or family members to download Spot On and subscribe to it? Do I ask a lot from you?